My research is listening to marginalized youth to combat online and offline hate speech. My name is Natasha Doyon. I'm a PhD candidate in art education. I'd like to thank the two organizations that I partnered with. One is CESA, and which is a nonprofit organization, and Project Someone. But it doesn't, okay. This? Okay, so my research is a twofold arts-based action research study. One thread is action research about the impact of hate speech, both online and offline, on refugee and immigrant youth. Here I've used a qualitative arts-based approach to help youth participants develop digital literacy skills and transform online images, texts, and symbols into new alternative digital narratives. The other thread examines implicit biases in tutors and teachers who work with refugee youth in Montreal, Quebec. The aim of this thread is to understand the experiences of community members, teachers, tutors, mentors, social workers, who from positions of power and privilege work with marginalized people in multicultural environments, and through such understanding to help them improve the services they provide. What will be covered is Today, what is my research? What can arts-based action research bring to digital literacy? Ethics in youth, ethics with teachers, my research design, what are the links between social media and well-being, and how is the research to be evaluated? What did they say and what did they do? Just to clarify that I'm at the stage of my research right now where I've collected all the data, and I'm at the phase where I'm analyzing it. Just so. Here and here. Well. Action research is a qualitative research methodology that is rooted in values of social transformation based on the community's emerging needs. The research is with others rather than on others, and is focused on insider knowledge in context-specific situations. Action research is based on a cycle of planning, so identifying or co-identifying a problem within a specific community. Acting, so creating workshops, writing, talking, interviews, again in collaboration with what you think is emerging from the participants that you're working with. Then observing what takes place, sharing this information with the members that you're working with. Self-reflexive practices are embedded within this cycle, and again, part of the data. So the I is very important in how you analyze your research and your findings. Arts-based action research is using the art as data towards understanding the problem and thus transforming it to improve. It's a very practical, and it's based on improving real problems that you've come together to identify with your participants. So this is the cycle. It's a methodology, a cycle that repeats. The goal is not saturation or generalizability, because it is a living theory that is changing and it's community specific. So like I mentioned before, the cycles then move you into a new direction, and you're constantly moving and modifying as you're going forward. The research design. So I just want to state here that marginalized is being used as a term to identify a non-dominant cultural group and or individual who is at risk of becoming invisible, negatively stereotyped, and or targeted in cultural and societal spheres, and educational for that matter. So my research design in this graph here, you see, so it's situated within, it's arts-based, so art is part of the data, but the essence is action research. It's cyclical, and it's interactive, participatory, and community-focused. The workshops were designed to understand refugee and asylum seekers' youth lived experiences. The workshops were progressively modified based on new knowledge. Making artwork that responded to the emerging themes, using art as data, journaling using self-reflexive exercises, interviews, surveys, and graphs. I was committed to being ethically focused on highlighting the participants' voices and working within a feminist communitarian model that proposes research within communities to benefit community members. As I mentioned, the research was also with teachers, the teachers who work at this organization. So the second part of my research was to work with the teachers and tutors who taught the refugees and asylum seekers at CESA, which is a nonprofit organization that teaches French and offers cultural and societal outings. The aim was to improve their teaching practices by using self-reflexive exercises, artwork, surveys, and interviews. The workshops covered themes such as awareness of implicit biases, power imbalances between teachers and students, and privilege. However, for this presentation, I'm mostly going to focus on what I did with the youth. So, again, it was an arts-based action research. And yeah, basically, this image is always a good one. You know, it's pretty classic, but I think it applies to even what, like Nancy was saying, it could be in a regular school, it could be a teacher working with children, it could be in a community-centered approach to seeing our power and privilege and how, when we don't have awareness of those, how we perpetuate them and actually can cause damage. So underlying assumptions with arts-based action research. Epistemological is knowledge creation is collaborative. Research is a living theory, continuously open to critique and change. Subjective biases are incorporated into new understandings. Methodological is the approach is open-ended and educational. It's a developmental approach. The social purpose is based on the principle of taking personal responsibility for one's beliefs and actions. And there are criticisms, I'm just naming a few, but does it meet the researcher's needs more than it promotes social justice and transformation? Is it too narrow and obscure? And what is the risk of promising change when the researcher is embedded within a power structure? So I had already been, with this organization, I had already been volunteering as an art educator with CESA for a year and a half before starting the research. And more importantly is that the youth were asking to be listened to because they are most often spoken for by adults. This was coming out of themes that they had worked on over the year and a half that I was there, and this was a theme that kept coming up. So as a marginalized community, they're at risk of being further misrepresented and stereotyped by the media and in their communities. I'm also an immigrant, so that was part of my desire to work within a community that helped immigrants. Okay, so with ethics and the youth and ethics and the teachers, before I could actually start formally talking about this, I talked to the board and the teachers who worked there, and we came up that this would be an important thing in terms of digital literacy and working with the youth. So, and they also loved making art, so they were like, okay, why don't we, so together we came up with this, but before I could pitch it as something formal, I got ethics approval, and then I was able to I gave about 3 information sessions to the youth and their guardians. Then I got consent. But as I said, all of this is being done on Zoom, right? It's during COVID. It's really hard to start and like get paperwork done when you don't see people face to face or their guardians. Originally, my first research question was about embodying and blah, 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 but that can make people feel really uncomfortable when you talk about the body, embodied knowledge, especially cultures that even this as a language could be an issue, and there's a lot of like just basic things that to be respectful and ethical. It was just not possible. So I narrowed it down to that, my research question now, but Zoom made things a little complicated. It also meant some people could join that lived really far away. So, you know, it had positives and negatives. With the teachers, again, I had to wait until I got ethics approval, then I was able to talk to them. Again, everybody was sampled from CESA. It was the teachers that work with the youth. Just to say that the youth, maybe it's the next slide, but the youth, they come to this organization. They come every Saturday for 2 hours. And so these tutors are also have the role of a bit of a mentor. The young people, they sometimes can disclose things to the tutors and these teachers that they can't at school or with their families. There's quite a bond that's created in this community, and quite life-saving in a way for the youth. So this was shared, the workshop with the youth was shared during the 16 workshops over a 6-month period. I would meet with them every Saturday for 2 hours after their CESA sessions. I would provide diverse materials that touched on what they had said the previous week, in addition to bringing in pedagogical resources to prompt and go deeper into a subject. At the beginning, I was more structured, and as time went by, and they were actually leading the workshops and co-designing the process, which was really marvelous to see. So what some of the themes that we covered were the differences between free speech and hate speech, representation and stereotypes. Do you see yourself represented? If not adequately, what could change and how? I see time is going, but I'll just show you. So basically, about 4 minutes. So these were the highlights of the preoccupations they shared. Basically, through everything, the need for youth, especially newcomers, was the need to connect and have a space to share their stories. A lot of the warm-up sessions, like just as we would talk and saying hello, were centered on their school. This is central to their experience and what takes up the majority of their time. So they just needed to talk and air out their frustrations. That was major, was sharing. About being black, being Muslim, so wearing hijabs. The fact of sexism, they felt that they were, as young women, had extra pressure to perform. In terms of hate speech, they recognized it as something that could be actually quite important because there's a lot of good things that you should hate. So it wasn't black and white, it was a lot of nuance. But what came out of this and what they wanted to do, and this is where the art couldn't really help, was they created a comic, and a bilingual comic. This is Nos Histoires, but in English, Our Story. It's both online and in paper. They won a grant from Rising Youth, so they were able to print 170 copies in both French and English. It's pedagogical in the sense that they also created questions in the back so it could be used in schools. And it's currently being shared in the GSDE in the classe d'accueil, which is where you go when you're a new immigrant. So they're able to share this with other refugee youth. They've been invited to Equitas. They've shared it with the North Montreal youth and from the north. So it's being used, and they use it in their own classrooms with their teachers. So they came up with a fictional story about two arriving at an airport and being stereotyped, and then using the internet to kind of communicate with people, and how that can be a supportive mechanism, how it can be damaging. But for them, it was really important to highlight how, through their journey of making this project, that they were able to identify ways to create an alternative narrative to what they were seeing. And so I'll get to what they said in a minute. But so in my research, so they had questions for a teacher to start conversations in classes with other youth, and not just for refugee youth, not just classe d'accueil, but in ethics classes, in geography class, just to start these conversations going. Because they feel incredible isolation. It was also something that they had mentioned. Here they're identifiable. In my research, they're anonymous, but they agreed that I can share this. We're still in contact. Okay, so with the teachers briefly, with the tutors, I also, the ABAR methodology, we worked on teacher identity, privilege, collaboration, and power imbalance. These were really important workshops. We did not have enough time. It's really hard to get adults to give time. Yeah. It's really hard to get anybody to give time, but especially adults. I found it even harder to kind of get their time. People are, so I was really, really happy with what I got. However, there was a lot more work to be done. And they were more resistant to artwork, preferred writing, going back to very judgmental about making art. They were like, oh my God, like that inner voice, like, I'm so bad. So it's, you're constantly, so I was like, fine, just do what you want. This should be fun. How is this research going to be evaluated? So I'm currently collecting and analyzing multiple research data, so that was based on observations, surveys, interviews, artwork, self-reflections. Embodied knowledge, I'm using this, ideally, I come from a background in dance, theater, and visual art. And as a source of experience, it resides in our body. This is how we know we did something. The art is great because you're doing it, right? You're acting it, you're doing it, and it kind of ingrains. So I just threw that there, but I found that those who made the artwork were able to talk in nuance more than just repetitive, and we have a narrative that we follow. The art kind of blows that up a bit. This is the data analysis, so organizing it, coding, looking at themes and patterns. And then my next phase now is to interpret the findings. What did the participants share? Well, the youth said that they gained confidence and agency. They liked being creative. They enjoyed sharing stories and connecting with other youth like themselves. And they developed more critical ways of what they see online, and they understand why they see things and how they interpret them. And they're not just, they didn't feel as passive in that regard. That's what they had mentioned. The teachers said they developed more awareness regarding their implicit biases and privilege. That they would need more teacher education in community organizations. That they liked the freedom of choice to participate in art making, and they preferred writing and journaling. And thank you very much.